Well, I thought I'd show you a few things that are in this Dungeons and Dragons game that's on here, the video game. It's called Neverwinter. It's free to download and stuff like that, but you can play, pay to win, if you will. This is a castle known as Castle Never. It's one of the mainstays of the actual game. That green light that's going on here, there's a sphere of annihilation. It's hard to dodge through that. You have to wait during certain times and try to manipulate around it. Here we have a library, of course. But if we go back into this main part here, I can show you some things that'll show you, other than travertine designs and things like that, that you would find even in old medieval castles. And in fact, way back in the machine here, there's a lot of writings that end up showing here and glowing just during certain parts of fighting the boss, which would have happened out there on that floor there. And whenever they glow, they're calling on certain buffs and debuffs versus you and things like that. Other ones are just script writings that are there. Here's a showing of Neptune itself, and if you'll look, it has the 3 spikes on the top of it, and then a deviation. And if you'll look at this, that has the double side on the right here, and then on the left it has an arcing form. This is supposed to represent pretty much where it comes from in the sky, how deep it is along the path, and so on like that. There's even some linear A writing that looks like that tree with some roots and a lot of foliage up above that too, and that's actually what they believe that contains. And due to the amount of lines that are drawn in certain parts, it gives you a sound. So it's a part of the earliest forms of writing, and it even predates Sumerians and stuff like that. I have a video coming out where it shows a tablet where this type of information is going on. And again, and I had made the comment repeatedly that language and linguistics at least goes back to 5200 BC, and that's because of that form that's there. It's been quite a while since I've talked about that, though. Then also see on here, there's something that looks like a fire demon, or the essence of fire. But in the writing there, it would probably say something about the purification of fire. There up to his top left right there is an indication of the seasons, the year, and everything. In fact, that actually has something to do with the cross. You can also see that same indication right there with the X on the middle of a circle and so on. There's skull and crossbones that are back there. More sigils and magic and stuff that's going on here and here. And you can see it's recreating or representing quite a few of these representations. And whenever he died, it was caught right in the middle of it. So it shows a part of it where it's really yellow looking here. In different forms it's that too. In fact, there's also a gas that's around this room here, and if you get out on the edges, it can cause you problems during certain times. Hey, there's a griffin right there. That should be something we're all familiar with too. But then again, that flying creature, that man, that lion, and so on has to do with the 4 seasons again. Just like the representation of the manticore and stuff does in ancient times. I don't know how much got cut out of that there with the blurring of the screen. I didn't realize till I was looking at it. Here you can see something that's a depiction of a griffin, a lion with wings. But then that also has to do with calendars and the major seasons of an ancient summer and winter, if you will. So you can look at that there. And if we wanted to really confirm it off of it, we would end up putting a man's face on that, like a manticore, and the scorpion at the other end of it, leading to a different ideal. Along with the ideas of the Lamassu, which are the guardians in front of the old Sumerians and Akkadians gateways that were there, where you see a bull man that has wings and so on, and you don't understand what that means, but it connects to the 4 seasons. So there's a lot of this symbology and mythology that carries through to a modern time, but a lot of people don't know of it, and a lot of things get taken out of context sometimes and things too. But I think it's pretty neat. And because it caught it at this one certain point here, I thought I'd share it with you. But here you can see an ancient writing that's there that looks somewhat like Sanskrit, somewhat like Arabic, somewhat like the ideas of Mohenjo-Daro and places like that that have some scratch writing into them. And that, along with that center symbol here that looks like a flower or a plant, is one of the earliest known symbols in linear type of writing, which it's believed that it spawned from the idea of plant growth, spring, things along that line. But also the different numbers of lines will give you a different context to what's going on here, along with the other symbols such as skull and crossbones, the Neptune symbol, the symbol of the earth, if you will, the symbol of all the seasons and how we sit upon that, and so on. So it's pretty neat just to be able to share with you that in Dungeons and Dragons, and of course that is based on all mythology, and therefore it ends up encapsulates a lot of the truths that are known in it, and it's just done in a representation. And if you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't. But I think it's interesting that they put so much of this into it. A couple of years back, they started getting all SJW about things and took certain things out of the game because certain people got offended. But of course, that's all based on a mythology that comes from a time before those other people we're talking about were really well even known or so on. So kind of odd that that goes on, but in a modern day, you can definitely see it. So let's just go ahead and get out of here. This is Castle Never again. It's some kind of like Disney type castle that's huge. It used to be the largest dungeon that we had in the game, and it would take you about 40 minutes, 35, 40 minutes just to get to the last boss, and then depending on how many times you had to take a shot at it, could make that even longer. They eventually, a couple of years ago, just took and streamlined that down, and you no longer go through that castle the way that you did. In fact, there's little portals now that help to cheat you along and go to different places. This is the new area of the Drow and the Menzoberranzan, and they show you representation here of like living underground, and all these people have an odd glowing purple light that they use, a phosphorescence, like the green that's on lantern bugs and things like that. But in reality, we have something like this. Like Mohenjo-Daro I spoke of, and like a few other places that we found this vast network of people living up underground during this time too, that they could go through the major part of winter, during sieges against them, all kinds of things shown up to be quite different. But, oh, what's my current look here? Yeah, I'm wearing my gold and black little outfit from the last little event that's here, and probably should change it. Where I'm at now, though, is known as Menzoberranzan. And Menzoberranzan could actually be reconfigurated in the idea of Mesopotamia. It's kind of relating to that. So, many connections to that. But instead of having under cities built like this and the way that we look at it because someone described it to you and drew it out, in reality what we have is the insides of buildings made from caverns, built into caverns, running to caverns, running to caverns, in a huge network, some of them many miles worth of travel that you would have to go, and multiple levels down and through the ground. It's pretty interesting, but this has to do with a type of elf known as a drow elf. Strange that they would be underground, and instead of being like cave bugs having no color at all, they are known to have a darkened, weird, bluish gray, dark skin, and all of them seem to have an extreme blonde or even white hair, and they're a little edgy and so on, and of course that's what sets up the whole idea of going between the two of them. But my guy that's right here used to be a drow elf in the game here, but a couple of years ago, whenever that was no longer a benefit, but being a human had another benefit it added onto it, I just re-rolled my character and turned it into this. Luckily I did whenever I did, because after that point you can't do it as often or as easy as you did before. But you know, that's just different ideas.